Rand Paul is a fascinating politician. He is a true ideologue, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He is a libertarian. He has said repeatedly that he believes that we should have as small a government as possible, and he wants taxes to be incredibly low. Instead of people paying 30%, he wants them to pay 10%. So that would, and I'm talking about people in the upper income categories. You can just imagine if you cut everything by a third, what might happen to low-income programs, food stamps, Head Start, what happened with Pell Grants for kids, what might happen, of course, to the military, which some people might like to see cut by a lot, what might happen with Medicare, Medicaid. And so, he's managed to become, elected to a higher office than his father held. He's a senator from Kentucky. And he's in the running, it seems, as a possible presidential candidate in 2016 on the Republican side, looking for the GOP nomination. So I think he is fascinating just because of what he thinks and the political space he inhabits, but also because he may be an actual force to reckon with as a political player in 2016. Now, this is a guy who has not been shy about sharing a lot of his views, I and others might consider often excessive, mainly before he entered the Senate, but even, some after he did. And so I, discovered that, not a big discovery, but that, he's been talking to people with video cameras for a number of years. And by spending time online, YouTube and elsewhere, myself and some of my colleagues here at Mother Jones have been able to find a lot of statements that he made that were, well, let's put it, interesting. In one instance, he talked about how he believed that Dick Cheney, became an advocate of the invasion of Iraq because he wanted to help his former company, Halliburton, a military contractor, and then he used, Dick Cheney and the others used 9/11 as an excuse to start a war that would profit this company. Now, anyone who's familiar with my work knows that I'm no fan of Dick Cheney, and that indeed I co-wrote a book on how the Bush-Cheney administration falsely sold the war to the American public, mainly through complaining or scaremongering about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But still, that doesn't mean that Dick Cheney launched this war so he could benefit a company that he had a previous financial tie to. So I thought that was really a harsh thing for someone who was a member of the Republican Party to say about the last Republican vice president. And so that was ended up being a bit of a big story, getting Rand Paul to say that. Other things that he has said about the budget, about Israel, other things have been kind of flip-flops from what he says now. So he's just a guy who is often, this is to his credit, spoken his mind, but that also means from a journalistic perspective, he's left a really tremendous trail to examine. And as he becomes more prominent in the party, in terms of debates over drones, foreign policy, voter ID, there's much more to look at, and and I think there's more of an audience out there for people who want to know more about Rand Paul. You have to caveat any prediction with the, technical, explanation. Who knows? I mean, anything's really possible in politics. Rand Paul, his obstacles are rather obvious. He is skeptical about military intervention overseas, and he has called for ending aid to Israel, at least in the past, and ending all foreign aid. Now, this gets the establishment within his own party completely gaga. You know, they can't stand him. You know, John McCain has referred to him and Ted Cruz as wacko birds. They see him as an isolationist. Dick Cheney has attacked him, not by name, but everybody knows who he was talking about when he decried isolationists within the party. So if Rand Paul runs and gets close to, you know, looks like he's going to, like he has a shot of winning, you can expect the empire to strike back and strike back hard. Whether he can, you know, get around that, whether he can win the votes of Republican voters with that sort of foreign policy, also with a libertarian stance in which he's, you know, not, not tough on drug sentences and is in favor of certain type of liberalization of drug laws, which are things that liberals might like, but might not play well in a Republican primary. So he has a lot of deficits that he will have to overcome. And, you know, it's very hard, I think, with the Republican Party becoming more and more conservative, even though he's of the Tea Party, for him to win with this sort of amalgamation of conservative libertarianism, which is cutting back government to nothing, and liberal libertarianism, which is, you know, going easy on some drug crimes and being being skeptical about military interventionism. So that, you know, so he's an odd duck, and that would make him a very odd fit with the Republican Party. You know, should he manage, you know, to win the nomination, then that will show that he has a certain sort of political skills and talents that at this stage a lot of people would be surprised by. And that would make him competitive. Listen, we live in it's a 40-40 nation, maybe a 45-45 nation, where each side starts with 40 to 45% of the vote, mainly because their voters hate the other side so much. And so you only then need to win a smaller group. And that means with, with certain external circumstances, almost anything can happen and almost anybody can win if they get to that position.